Good afternoon, and thank you all of you for joining us on this webinar in observing International Coffee Day. So this webinar presented to you today is titled Black Gold of the Tropics. So it is a webinar in continuation of the TropSci 2021, which is The Future Belongs to the Tropics. So today's webinar is organized by the Mahathir Science Award Foundation and the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, together with the International Science Council Regional Office for Asia and the Pacific. So the Academy of Sciences Malaysia is an independent organization representing the scientific minds of Malaysia. It carries out strategic studies that are independent, evidence-based, reliable, and timely for the benefit of all. So this year will also be the Academy's 25th anniversary. The Mahathir Science Award Foundation seeks to encourage excellence in tropical scientific research that will bring direct benefits to countries in the tropics and the global community at large. So annually, the Mahathir Science Award Foundation gives awards in recognition of the best scientific contributions and innovations in solving the problems of the tropics in 4 different categories, namely tropical medicine, tropical natural resources, tropical agriculture, and tropical architecture and engineering. So currently the call for nominations for the 2021 are open for the tropical architecture and engineering and tropical agriculture categories. So do visit our website to learn more about the nominating process. So we will now move on to our webinar for today. So without further ado, I would like to invite academician Dr. Mazlan Othman to say a few words. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Good day, everyone, and again, another welcome to the series of webinars on the theme of the future belongs to the tropics. First, allow me to give you some insight before we start this, our topic today, why we think the future belongs to the tropics. Now, the tropics is resource rich, and I'm going to give you some statistics. As a region, it accounts for 40% of the world's total surface area. It hosts nearly 95% of the world's mangrove forests and approximately 80% of the world's biodiversity. 54% of the world's renewable water resources are in the tropics. And this is, to me, the most interesting of all, and that 82% of the world's living languages are spoken in the tropics, which of course implies that diversity and the wealth and the richness in the culture. By 2050, the region will host more than half of the world's population and 2/3 of its children. But at the same time, 85% of the poorest people live in the tropics. So whilst tropic nations have made significant progress, they face a variety of challenges that demand focused attention across a range of development indicators and data in order to achieve sustainable development. So to achieve this, the Academy of Sciences Malaysia has established the Mahathir Science Award, which Sufyan just mentioned, and that carries a prize of $100,000 US to recognize scientists who make significant contributions to tropical sciences. To support this prize, we are organizing the International Conference on Tropical Sciences, their contributions to sustainability, or TropSci, and it's going to happen in the second half of next year. Many activities will be held to build awareness of the goals of TropSci in order to attract participation amongst policy makers, implementers, both in the public and private sectors, and researchers. For those of you who have been following us, thus far we have covered topics of mangroves, youth in the tropics, as well as engineering for sustainability in the tropics. So today we will present to you a webinar in conjunction with International Coffee Day. Why coffee? Coffee is cultivated almost exclusively in warm, humid tropical environments. Countries like Colombia, Brazil, Ethiopia, Rwanda, and Indonesia produce almost all of the world's coffee. This band of countries make up what is known as the bean belt. But temperatures across the globe are rising, and these coffee-rich regions are threatened. We are beginning to see coffee grown on higher and higher elevations, which invariably leads to clearing of sensitive highlands environment. And we will be talking about the highlands environment in December of this year. Coffee is the world's second most tradable commodity. The industry is estimated to be 10 billion US dollars. I think this changes whatever you're reading, and it provides jobs for 125 million people. But as I said, there are problems which this industry needs to address. And today's webinar will cover these issues. So let's see what's going to be happening today. I have been told by my team that I should find a good quotation on coffee. I think Farah is expecting a Gandhi-like quotation, but I'm choosing a quotation by Jerry Seinfeld, an American comedian, actor, writer, producer, director, you know, a lot of things. And this is what he says about coffee, and I think I relate to this a lot. We want to do a lot of stuff. We're not in great shape. We didn't get a good night's sleep, and we're a little depressed. So coffee solves all those problems in one delightful cup. I think that describes a lot of us. But let me give you a few more statistics. I've been told by Lutfi that 3 billion cups of coffee are being drunk a day. And Sufyan tells me that there is a there's an espresso machine on the International Space Station. Why is it significant? Because when I was involved in the astronaut program, our astronaut program, we had to calculate what we brought to the ISS in terms of grams. And so, you know, a coffee machine would be a lot of grams. And the fact that we have a coffee machine up there shows how necessary it is. Anyway, let me not say too much on those things. We have a refreshing lineup of speakers today. Now, you all have everybody here has this book, but you all have it on your website. And to give us a coffee 101, I'd like to invite Professor Jonathan Morris of University of Hertfordshire in the UK. Jonathan, are you there?
Okay, everyone, I'm hoping that you can hear me. Unfortunately, we have a freeze on the screen that we're viewing, so hopefully you can now view my screen and hear my screen, and if somebody wants to indicate that to me in the chat, that would be very helpful. I'm going to go ahead and hope that that's the case, and I'm going to say thank you to the organizers for welcoming me, for inviting me to this, and for spending International Coffee Day with you. My name's Jonathan Morris. I am a coffee historian, by which I mean I'm a professional historian. I'm employed at the University of Hertfordshire, and I work on the history of coffee. As you'll see, and I've written a few volumes on the subject. This Coffee, a Comprehensive Guide to the Bean, the Beverage, and the Industry has been translated into several languages, as you can see. And more recently, I produced the book Coffee, A Global History, and it's from that really that I want to do a little bit of an introduction to the history of coffee today for the webinar. And I wanted to start by just pointing out perhaps the way that the focus of coffee production has shifted between different parts of the tropics over the course of history. So you'll see that if we still all the way up to 1700, all the coffee in the world was being grown in Africa and Arabia. That we moved to a period in which really the Caribbean and Asia were the dominant producers, followed by a remarkable dominance by Latin America. And in the 20th century, that continues, that Latin America is the strongest producer, but we have periods in which first Africa and then later and more recently Asia have re-emerged as major producers. So I want to outline quickly how and why that happened. So let's start at the beginning, and this is the beginning because this is Ethiopia. This is coffee growing semi-wild, what we call sort of forest coffee. These are the coffee cherries up here, these beautiful red things. So coffee is indigenous to Ethiopia, and it's still actually harvested by gentlemen such as these in the forests today. where the Ethiopians used to use the plant for various foods and beverages. They would use them for making things closer really to tea than to coffee. Now, in the 1450s, rather, coffee began to be exported from Ethiopia across the Red Sea into Yemen. Now, why did that happen? Really because the coffee is being used by Sufis in Yemen to give them energy and to assist them in their religious ceremonies, particularly the ones that last all night. So they obviously enable them to keep going, as it were, with the energy they get from the coffee. They're mostly using at this stage a beverage that we would call quiche, which is really made mostly from the drying cherry around the coffee stone itself. By the 1540s, there's enough demand for coffee in Arabia that coffee cultivation is begun, and it starts, therefore, the first coffee farms are like these in current day Yemen, on these terraces where we're growing the coffee here. But as the popularity of coffee spread out from just its use by the Sufis to more general use, so coffee is exported really around the whole of the Islamic world, out from the Red Sea and around the Gulf and the Indian Sea. From this, the port of Al-Mokair, commonly known to us as Mocha, and that's where the notion of mocha as a type of coffee comes from. So for the first 200 years or so, that's where all coffee is grown. But coffee, Yemen itself comes under the control of the Ottoman Empire, ruled from Turkey, from Constantinople, now Istanbul. So first of all, how are they making the coffee? Well, here's an example of coffee brewing equipment. This is the key piece here. This is called the Yetzve, C-E-Z-V-E. You brew the coffee in there, you then put it into this, which is known as an e-brick. This is basically a ceremonial piece. This is the serving piece, and you serve into these lovely little cups here called finjans. So that's the way that coffee is being made. And as I say, it reaches Istanbul, then called Constantinople, the capital of the Ottoman Empire, and therefore on the boundary, as it were, of the continents of Europe and Asia. In the 1550s, it's sold on the streets, as you can see here. And we have the rise of the coffee house, a place where effectively the first kind of social place where respectable Muslim men, so those who weren't going to be drinking illicit alcohol or anything, could meet, could talk, could socialize outside of the mosque. And as you can see, they socialized here as much by smoking, here we have hookahs, etc., as by actually drinking coffee. But you can see up here that we have all the coffee drinking equipment, and there are people drinking coffee here as well. Now, that drink of coffee then is taken by Turkish merchants on their trips into Europe. We first see coffee in Europe in Venice in the 1570s. And there's a myth, and I've put this in for Maslan, there's a myth that coffee is first seen in, the first coffee house is this coffee house, the Blue Bottle, that opened in Vienna in the 1680s. And it's always claimed that this was sort of set up by this guy who's known as Georg Franz Kolitsky. And Mr. Kolitsky had been a spy for the Austrians during the siege of Vienna in 1683, and supposedly said that afterwards what he wanted was the bags of coffee that the Turkish army had left behind as his reward, and he used these to set up his first coffee house. It's a beautiful story, and there are, however, certain problems. First of all, coffee was being sold in Vienna as early as the 1660s, and actually, big boast for London here, first coffee house in Europe is actually London in 1652. You'll notice that's a long time after coffee arrived, and that's because in the interim, coffee was being sold as a medicine. It's really only in the 1650s that coffee starts to be drunk in coffee houses in Europe. So how does coffee go to the rest of the tropics? Well, the first people to plant coffee beyond Arabia really are the Dutch. They take out some coffee from Malabar in India, where it was being grown really for part of that Islamic production, and transplant it and plant in 1697 in Java. And that remains a sort of the center, Java and the Dutch East Indies, as they then were, for coffee production for much of Europe. So you can see in this picture, which is much later, this is from the 1870s, this is still really roughly the same. Here we have the coffee trees in the plantation being harvested. Here we have the red berries, the fruits of the coffee. The coffee is being hulled and put into sacks here, transported, roasted, grind, and brewed. However, in reality, it's really being brewed for consumers like this. Here's this picture is of a Dutch girl in 1756 enjoying her breakfast, and you'll see she's using this coffee pot here. This is called a droppelminer. At the very end, it has a little valve here that you open and close to let the coffee through, and the droppel refers to the fact that actually it frequently ended up having drops coming out of it. So a little problem keeping your breakfast table clean. Now, as we said, Asia continues as a major center of production for coffee up until, unfortunately, this. This is a huge incident in coffee history. This is coffee rust. And from 1869, when this first outbreak took place in Sri Lanka, then Ceylon, it spread throughout Asia over the next 30 years, and indeed Africa, and wiped out most of the coffee growing areas. By the First World War, that Asian Pacific share of world production that had been about a third in the 1870s was down to less than 5%. So the big sort of winners out of that are Latin America, and particularly Brazil. Brazil in the late 19th century became the absolute world's dominant coffee producer, and it did so because it was supplying the world's dominant consumer, and that's the United States. So it's a very symbiotic relationship. Brazil, which expanded its coffee production further and further into the interior, it used first slave labor and subsequently immigrant labor, coerced labor, to bring more and more land into coffee production to fuel the big coffee roasting plants that were being set up in the US, where during the Civil War in particular, there had been the Union armies were served a lot of coffee. Coffee became a way of actually keeping your troops awake and keeping them happy. And post the Civil War, the first coffee roasting factories producing branded coffee, packaging the coffee, sending it out across the United States appear. By 1906, Brazil was producing 80% of the world's coffee. 80% of the world's coffee was coming from Brazil. 70% of that was going into the US. So the port of Santos that we see here in Sao Paulo, just outside Sao Paulo, became really the world's center of coffee. And so much coffee was coming in by railway and so forth to Santos that they would have a system here that you can see where they simply dropped the sacks into a kind of an underground conveyor system that took them into the port and onto the ships. And coffee in the US becomes this kind of everyday good that you drink more and more of. Here's the the ever-filling, refilling coffee cup which becomes known as the cup of Joe. So this very distinctive style of cheap everyday coffee. In the rest of the tropics, starting in the 1900s, there's a change in emphasis in coffee, where a new form, a new species of coffee is grown. Up until then, all the coffee is grown as what we call coffee Arabica. In the 1900s, a rust-resistant crop, another species called Robusta, started to be grown. It's much hardier. So it starts in the 1900s being planted, as you can see here, in Indonesia. But the big takeoff period is really just post the Second World War, really in the 1950s. As African states become independent, so particularly producers like Ivory Coast here, producing a lot of Robusta for the market. But now, the world's leading producer of Robusta, the world's leading second biggest coffee producer in the world since the 1990s is Vietnam. And here we see Vietnamese growers bringing their coffee beans and weighing their coffee beans. Robusta as a whole is now 35 to 40% of total world coffee production. And it's that increase in production that really enables the growth of new kinds of coffee and new kinds of coffee culture. So immediately after the Second World War in Italy, we see the growth of a new form of coffee, espresso brewed coffee. Using this is a Keely Gadgets machine, the high pressure machine. You put the coffee in, push it through at very high pressures, and it comes out with the so-called crema on top. So this is and that creates the kind of the Italian coffee bar scene around that drink. But soluble coffee, notably Nescafe, which essentially was developed for the US Army actually during the Second World War, but in the post-war period becomes a sort of a way of making coffee easy, accessible, and usually uses that cheaper Robusta coffee as part of its blend. And that for the first time means not only does Europe experience mass consumption, but so too do we see the growth of mass consumption of coffee outside Europe. And in particular, the first sort of really developed market is Japan. And Japan again creates its own consumer culture around really canned coffees, sale of canned coffees for the kind of on-the-go culture. So you drink your coffee as you go, you take it from the can, hot or cold. Finally, I want to talk about this, specialty coffee. We could spend all day talking about what specialty coffee is, but in the US, as coffee became ever cheaper, there was a reaction by some smaller producers to create a more focus on the notion of the coffee bean and the quality within the bean. So we got the setting up of specialist coffee stores supplying special quality beans. And here's one in 1971 that opened in Seattle with the name of Starbucks. Now, at this point, you'll notice there is no coffee machine here. It's purely selling beans. But in the 1980s, Howard Schultz, the owner of Starbucks, following a trip to Italy, seeing the Italian coffee bars, started converting to that coffee shop format, saying that, you know, if they serve those Italian drinks, they get a kind of in-store theater. And if they adapt the drinks to US tastes and sizes, so you see the rather mad size of the huge, much bigger drinks that were served in the States and in Starbucks, then what they could do is position those drinks as a kind of a premium or a lifestyle product. And it certainly worked, because we now have 32,000 Starbucks stores in over 80 countries around the world. And after the US, the largest number of those are in China, including this one in Shanghai. This is the Starbucks Roastery. And that's an attempt really to align Starbucks and what's often known as the second wave of coffee culture with this new third wave of coffee culture, artisan coffee. The kind of transnational kind of subculture that includes geeky approaches to coffee brewing. You can see those going on there. The kind of so-called World Barista Championships and hipster coffee. And that is the coffee culture that is really we're seeing spreading around the world. And particularly, I have to say, in recent years in Asia, which has become the dominant growth market for coffee consumption, and in which we can now say that the world barista champion comes from Japan. And it's widely stated there are more specialty coffee bars or specialty coffee shops in Seoul, in South Korea, than there actually are in Seattle. And that's part of a much bigger trend. And that trend is very important because it is one in which we're increasingly seeing producer countries also have consumer markets for coffee. Brazil is now the world's second biggest consumer market for coffee. And so we're seeing that spread through Asia and a little bit of development also in Africa. And so I would say that the future belongs to the tropics, because now the tropics are consuming the coffee that they've been producing for us. So thank you very much. I hope you managed to hear the talk. If you'd like to know more, please have a look at the book. come follow me on Twitter or Instagram. And back over to you, Maslin, hopefully.
Thank you, Jonathan. Wow, so that's a lot of information, Coffee 101. And we did hear you. We did hear you very clearly, and we looked at all your slides. To talk about the next issues, we would like to call on Mr. Edgard Bressani of the Capricornio Coffee in Brazil. So he's coming in from Brazil. I believe, is he in? Yeah, okay. Edgard, please.
Well, thank you for giving me the pleasure to be here today to talk to you about coffee. And happy International Coffee Day to all of you. Agriculture has been facing many challenges in the past decades, and you will always hear producers saying, you know, it's an industry in open sky. Next. The high temperatures in the summer and even in the winter time are increasingly common. Next. I had to take 4 years ago this picture you see on the screen. We usually start harvesting in May here in Brazil, and we had to initiate that in February in some fields at the farm at that year. And I usually say, and also Andrea Ili from Ili Café on our presentations, that there will be a shifting in the coffee producing areas in the globe in the future. And the frontiers will be moving up in the mountains and also to higher latitudes. Next. I started studying 6 years ago the impact of these heat at the farm. And this picture show you the study I've been conducting. And also a friend of mine has been conducting experiments like this. We have this like shade protecting the coffee trees to create a different temperature to reduce the sun exposure. And also we've been doing consortiums with trees so that these high trees create this microclimate, changing the need of the plants for water or even nutrients. Next. I think I have it. No rain in January, for example, will be a problem for the bean development, bringing, for example, low screen sizes, but also too much rain during harvest might affect the quality of the beans of that year. So every year has been a surprise for us. Next. This is, for example, a yellow bourbon bean presenting some problems due to too much rain. You see they are broken and they will be fermenting, bringing bad taste. So this is a problem of too much rain. Next. Also, the rain will many times drop beans to the ground, and they will have to be collected. We have to literally sweep the farm, because if we don't do it, there will be an infestation of coffee butter next year. So it's really tricky. If you leave the beans on the ground, you have a problem next year with the small holes that are not appreciated by roasters. It's also bringing you costs and the quality reduction. So we try to have the least amount of sweepings possible, but the rain will also play an impact on the amount because of this being dropped to the ground. Next. Drought also has been a huge problem for us. Historically, the past month in Brazil has shown one of the strongest lack of rain. And so far, we have only had 30% of the rain we need. And we have the blossoms opening in a few days. If we have rain, it's going to be good. If we don't, there will be a problem for the production of next year, certainly, because you cannot imagine. Well, Kuala Lumpur is very warm, but Brazil has been very warm too, even in the winter. Our winters are pretty much summers now. Next. Frost, of course, is always a nightmare. The state of Paraná, where we have business, was the largest producer of coffee until 1975, but a devastating frost, the Black Frost, changed the reality of coffee production in this state. And new frontiers were created after that. So when you see about Cerrado region, for example, it's a new area, it's a new frontier. The state of Bahia also, producers looking for farms in areas where frost was not happening. But in the future, coffee might be brought back to Paraná, although we still have a good volume. But from 20 millions produced in the past, today we have 1 million bags only. But with higher latitudes playing a role, Paraná will be in the future due to the good soils it has, producing again and playing an important role. Next. Hail, of course, is also a problem. You might be doing your estimates of production in January, and you might be affected by this hail storms that will, cause damages to the leaves and also make the beans also fall to the ground. And you immediately need to apply some medicine to avoid diseases on these leaves, fungi, and also this impacts the production of next year because of the damage you cause to the branches and to the leaves. Next. Extreme heat is also what I just mentioned about the 30% of rain that we have now so far, and we have an important moment of our cycle, which is the blossoming. Next. And one important thing is that the coffee belt has been changing a lot. We have been having this increase in temperatures of 0.2 degrees Celsius per decade since 1980, and this rate is increasing. And by 2050, the average warming over the coffee belt will be around 2.8 degrees Celsius. But most of almost like 20% of the coffee belt will be warming more than 4 degrees Celsius. And if the warming continues, coffee production will need to shift an average of 58 more or less kilometers per decade towards the pole. This is what I'm saying about the latitudes and why this latitude, the higher latitudes will take more coffee growing. And also they will have to go like 37 meters higher in altitude per decade. So we will areas in countries in Central America because the coffee frontier will be pushed up in the mountains in these areas. You will see also a reduction of 60% of the land in Brazil due to the global warming. I brought here an example of the change in the scenario of the coffee production in Uganda. You see that the areas drop dramatically, and this an increase only of 2 degrees, which will impact, of course, the lives of millions of people and millions of farmers. Next. Next. So here is if we cut on the emissions dramatically, we will still have a loss in coffee land of 43%. If we have only gradual emissions, this is going to represent 49% loss in the coffee land and 58% if we don't do anything. So we'd better run. There is something we have to do if we want to have not only coffee but other crops in in the tropics. Next. So what are the impacts of these things that I've just mentioned? Rain, drop, hail, frost. They will damage the crops. Next. They will increase the number of pests and diseases that we have, and new ones that are going other directions. Next. They will be bringing physiological changes to the plants. Next. There is a need for agricultural inputs. Next. Fire, erosion, flooding are also problems. Next. The loss of productivity in harvest is also one of these impacts brought by these things. The lower water availability. And I think that in the future, more and more in our countries, in South America, governments will be controlling the use of water. So am I going to give permission for using water for irrigation for coffee, or I'm going to give this permission to people that are growing rice and beans that are more important to the population? So this is a question mark for us. And if I get this permission, will my cost be extremely high? It's something that we are also thinking when we are planning the future of expansion of our coffee fields. Next. There is also quality insecurity because of these extreme heats, and the plants sometimes are not developing well. They are not taking the nutrients as they should. And if the plant is not well fed, you might have these coffees that taste like paper and not very tasty. Next. But also, we have to come up with some creative individual actions, and I'll be bringing some of them here. Next. Cover crops or something. Next. The monitoring of climatic data. We had a weather station at the farm so that we could not only provide to neighbors information on the amount of rain we had and wind and everything, but also having a weather station installed gave us more control of the information for planning and following what is happening at our terroir. Next, rations, for example, with the use of GYPSUM. We also next have to be conserving next our protection areas, the forests in Brazil. Every producer must protect at least 20% of the area of the farm with forest, and preserving the margins of the region, of the rivers and lakes. Our rules are very strict in terms of environmental protection. Next. Also, one good thing it is to apply organic fertilization. Something we do, we use and we give back the husk to the fields, also the parchment of the coffee as natural fertilizers. Next. Also to avoid, sometimes when you have an area that is very exposed from cold fronts coming from the south, we use windbreakers. We have these tall trees that will protect the plants for having the damage or the diseases brought by the cold weather. Next. Water collection, of course, we have to be creative and collect the waters from the rain and be very innovative. Containment basins also, it's my next picture. It's important. This is a way for us to prevent erosion because of the waters going down the mountains and washing and damaging the lines of trees. So we create this containment basins for the water. Next. And we also have to be creative with our collective actions. Please, next slides. Okay. So education is important, environmental awareness, we have to tell people more and more about this. So we've been doing intensive work in varietal research, trying to find the ones that are more resistant to drought, or also looking for varieties that are good with the cup profile, but also varietals that produce a good amount of coffee so that it compensates the yield and also the cup quality.
Thank you. Thank you, Edgar. Yes, you did promise you would come back to Malaysia after the pandemic, and we are looking for. Cut you off. There are lots of technical problems. Now I'm going to see, just take a minute, a few seconds. What am I supposed to do now? Keep talking. Okay, I'm good. I'm supposed to keep talking. I would like to give you some statistics, some coffee trivia, as they say. Oh, no prizes for. Oh, now I'm going to speak to this. You know, we've taken a bit of a risk doing this in this fabulous cafe to do something live, but you know, we couldn't stand it anymore sitting in our little office doing all these webinars, and that's why we've taken this risk. I think it's still well worth the risk despite all the technical glitches. Okay, trivia, but no prizes for this trivia, no questions, just to give you some trivia statistics. Like that, I think it's been mentioned several times that coffee is the second most traded commodity globally. Now, where am I supposed to be looking at? Here, there? Sufyan, look, where am I looking? There? Okay, thank you. And that there are, as I think I mentioned this before, that there are 2.25 billion cups of coffee being consumed all over the globe. I was just going to say at this very minute, at this very second, there are millions of cups of coffee being drunk somewhere, and that the industry is worth over 100 billion US dollars. There are over 24,000 coffee shops in the United States alone. Half of them are Starbucks, I suspect, they're in every corner. Again, these are all American statistics because the Americans are so good at keeping data. You know, I really like that about the Americans. Apparently, they drink 3 cups of coffee every day, which is not too much, I guess. And yearly, they drink a accumulated amount of 146 billion cups. You know, I thought astronomy was really like the billion and zillions, but coffee too seems to be all the billions numbers, you know. And here another 400 million cups of coffee in the US alone. And another statistics here, that 99%, here, 9% of coffee drinkers order their coffee through a mobile app. That's interesting. I've never had a cup of coffee sent to me until, you know, I work with the millennials who keep ordering cups of coffee to be sent to the office. This is terrific. Okay, I'm told that I don't need to talk anymore, that they are ready. Okay, so the next speaker is Ms. Trista Chua of Olam International China, and she's going to talk about the fact that it all boils down to economics. Please, Trista, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Sure. So let me from the first flight, which is the International Coffee Day. First of all, I would like to take this opportunity to wish everyone happy International Coffee Day. Here is some numbers about coffee, the example in the world. So now you can browse to slide 6. From this slide, you can see the world coffee consumption in the total of 60 kilobags. The majority of the world coffee is produced by South America, specifically Brazil. So now you can turn to slide number 9. From here you can see the top 5 countries in 2016. So there are Brazil, Vietnam, Colombia, Indonesia, and Ethiopia. So this is actually consists both Arabica and Robusta coffee. So now we can refer to slide number 10. Coffee is also, like any commodity, as I mentioned earlier, is traded on the open markets, and prices over time can be fluctuate based on supply and demand. So from the picture on the right hand side, you can see that's the weekly commodity futures price chart. This is just for your reference. This is how coffee being traded. So the Arabica is actually traded at the New York ICE markets, which refer to Intercontinental Exchange, whereas the Robusta is actually traded at the London Live markets. Live markets actually stand for London International Financial Futures and Options Exchange. So coffee futures can make wide swings within each trading days. So for your reference, now you can look at the slide 12. This is New York futures markets, and this is the price movement for the month in September. So you can see from the start of for the first day of September, the price is actually at around 123 cents per pound. And a few days ago, which is 29 September, the price has dropped till 110. So now you can see that the price is quite volatile. So what actually affect or what actually impact the coffee futures prices? Now we can refer to slide 13. There are a few factors which include climatic factors, geopolitical factors, speculated effect, enterprise trading, and the last, global demand outlook. So now we can look at the slide 14. Climatic factors. Coffee is highly sensitive to weather condition. It just does not thrive in certain weather condition. From the history, we actually know that it requires the sun, the rain, all goes probably so the coffee plants can grow well. When this thing does not happen, the farm output become very low, and the supply will become a problem. When this happens, the future markets will always increase due to the supply might be below or lower than the demand. So this is one of the factor. Then let's move to slide 15, geopolitical factors. When you look at the top coffee producing countries as a group, one of things that come in mind is that they could be politically unstable. And these top 5 countries actually produce around 65% of the world coffee production. So, for example, last month, there's the election in Brazil, which also causing the price of the markets fluctuated. And back 2 months ago, that's a rally in Ethiopia, which actually affect the export of the coffee, which also brings some impact to the New York markets. So there are 2 examples I want to share. And now we can look at the slide 16, which is a speculated effect. As I mentioned earlier, coffee is traded in the commodity markets. Therefore, the market activities of traders will always bring effects on the coffee prices. A rise in coffee trading activity usually results in a surge in the price of coffee, signaling to the markets that there is an increase in the demand for the coffee. And in addition, the trading activities for other related commodities like oil also could influence the green coffee prices. So in conclusion, if there's a big amount of plant getting into the commodity markets, getting into the New York coffee market, it will always lead to an increase in the coffee price. But when there's a plant getting out from the markets, the price of the New York markets will go down. So this is also related to the coffee demand and supply. So price trading. According to the International Coffee Organization, the big four coffee roasting company as Kraft, P&G, and Nestle purchase around half of the coffee produced worldwide. And this doesn't include Starbucks yet. So when this type of corporate or enterprise, when they start buying a lot of coffee in the markets, you can always expect the market price will go up. So this is one thing that one of the factors that affect the markets. So still supply and demand. So now we can move to the last slide, which is the global demand outlook. With more countries transitioning into what is called the developing world, the demand for the coffee is on the rise. As much as Brazil is the world's biggest producer of coffee, it does not even belong on the list of the top 10 coffee consumer per capita. None of the top 20 coffee producing nations belongs on the list of the top 10 consumer. This is mainly because they are less industrially. Therefore, as this country become more developed, you can always expect the demand of coffee will be rise significantly. So now the top 3 countries, according to the International Coffee Organization, the countries or regions that import coffee a lot belongs to European Union, US, Japan, Russia Federation, Canada. These are the top 5 importing countries. So that's my sharing for today. And so if you have any question, you are welcome to ask.
Thank you, Krista. I'm looking at IT now. Yes, they say that it's good. Okay, I'm afraid that time is not on our side with all these technical glitches. I can't take any questions. We'll have, in fact, to go on to our next session, which is actually a live session where we talk to the people in the coffee scene. And to take us through that is Coffeewala Lutfi. But as a segue into that, we would like to show you a video, and it becomes obvious what the video is about, but we are featuring somebody in the coffee enterprise that is working hard to take coffee to the people. IT, can you put on this video, please? Thank you.
Nama saya Muhammad Arif bin Sarudin, berasal dari Kuala Kasar Perak, menetap di Seremban dalam tahun 2000. Saya seorang pesara tentera. Saya pesara tentera. Saya tamat perkhidmatan saya dalam tentera tahun 2017. Jadi sekarang ni selepas berkhidmat daripada tentera, saya menjual kopi dalam kereta. Dalam erti kata lain, dalam mobile kopi. Dulu saya pernah duduk di Australia setahun lebih ikut isteri belajar. Jadi saya tahu pasal-pasal kopi yang menggunakan mesin kopi ni dekat Australia lah. Jadi timbul rasa minat untuk minum kopi sendiri. Jadi tahun lebih tu duduk kat Australia minum kopi pakai mesin. Jadi dah tagih minum kopi. Jadi balik Malaysia baru saya tahu apa dia Starbucks, apa dia Gloraji, kafe-kafe yang menggunakan machine kopi. Okey, dekat Australia ni saya bukannya kerja buat kopi. Dari kerja lain, saya macam-macam kerja saya buat dekat Australia tu. Balik sini, dah lama saya pergi melancong ke New Zealand. Saya tengok orang meniaga kopi pakai van, pakai kereta semua. Lepas tu timbul saya minat. Okey, lepas saya berkhidmat daripada Angkatan Tentera, setahun sebelum bersara, saya dah modify kereta kopi saya tu. Saya buat sendiri, semua saya buat sendiri. Kayu-kayu yang ada dekat kereta kopi saya tu, saya buat sendiri. Saya belajar sendiri, saya tahu masa saya beli mesin kopi, dia orang ajar lah setting mesin macam mana, button single shot, double shot tu semua. Lepas tu mana yang lain-lain tu, yang buat cappuccino ke, latte ke, black white ke, saya belajar sendiri. Saya rasa tak sedap, saya buang. Saya rasa masam, saya buang. Sampai saya rasa sendiri sedap, saya boleh minum. Itu saja. Saya rasa saya nak kekalkan macam ni sebab saya tak minat kafe. Saya tak minat jadi kafe tunggu daripada pagi sampai ke malam buka kafe. Saya suka datang macam tu lah. Saya nak berniaga, saya berniaga. Saya tak nak berniaga, saya tak berniaga. Tu je. Tapi ada orang lain lah peminat kopi pagi-pagi. Adalah orang yang pegang kopi saya ni. Dekat tempat yang saya berniaga ni tak semestinya orang yang berada beli kopi. Makcik-makcik pun beli kopi saya ni sebab dia orang minat tengok konsep saya berniaga. Itulah saya kata kopi ni bukannya macam teh tarik, macam air balang tu semua. Dia ada peminat dia, kopi ni. Tapi saya rasa cara macam saya berniaga ni boleh memperkenalkan kepada orang ramai untuk datang membeli kopi yang betul-betul original, yang betul-betul tak ada campur apa-apa. Kalau tengok orang pergi kafe, kalau dia tengok kopi tu macam yalah, kafe tu dapat standard sikit lah, standard. Lepas tu ada bergaya lah, kafe yang bergaya. Dia orang takut nak masuk. Jadi macam saya dia santai, yang tak ada lah pakai smart banyak pun. Jadi dia orang berani nak mendekati saya punya kafe ni, program kopi ni. Kadang-kadang dia orang tanya macam mana, pasal apa harga tu mahal, pasal apa harga tu murah, yang ni mahal. Dia cerita lah apa yang saya tahu.
Yep, let's go. So thank you everyone, and welcome back to the session. And for this session, this will be a bit more, I would say, a bit more casual than what we had previously. So we won't take up your screen with more presentations, but I think everyone would have found like what has been presented so far. I found it very interesting, and I mean there's definitely a lot to process. And I think I'm very fortunate to have with me today a few my fellow panel members from Malaysia who can probably give us a bit more context and ideas about what we have seen from the international panel previously. So before we go further, let me just introduce this panel and introduce myself. I'm Lufi Hakim Arif, and I will be your facilitator, I suppose, for this session. So we've called this session No Time for Bad Coffee, which I think everyone would agree, but we would want to know what are the different types of coffee and what do we mean by bad coffee, because I mean everyone has their different preferences and tastes and wants in a sense. But before I introduce each panel, I think just to sort of like give a bit of a background, and I'm sure like everyone's, we've heard a lot of stats, a lot of seen charts and maps, but do humor me, do allow me to just give a bit more information on coffee, because this is International Coffee Day. Across the world, there are different types of coffee that people consume. Whether in Malaysia we have our kopi os, our kopi tarik, and so on and so forth. In the Philippines we have the kaping barako. In Spain and in Hispanic countries we have the café con leche. the Cubans like the El Pecado. Apparently it's espresso with condensed milk, which sounds a bit like our own coffee here. And the Vietnamese, and probably somewhat similar with the Thais as well. They have iced coffee, cafe da. I've probably mangled coffee names in 4 different languages there, but which is fine, I suppose, because we are trying to be international. So yeah, I mean, I think that just sets up our session. We have globally different ways of consuming coffee and enjoying the drink and what it means for people in different places. So before I go to my first question, let me first introduce our panel today, who have very generously agreed to be with us live today. So to my right is Eddie Dailami from Pinto Coffee. He runs a farm in Janda Baik where you plant over 1,500 trees.
Well, probably more.
Probably
yes.
more now, yeah. Are they Liberica or Arabica trees?
Arabica and Robusta a bit.
Arabica and Robusta a bit. Wow, that's very interesting. So, and then next to Eddie, we have Catherine Goh from Santan, who is the current general manager, and she headed the transformation from Asia in-flight brand in the sky to ASEAN's first fast food restaurant franchise. So I think we'll hear more about that when we talk about the industry. And then next to Catherine is Edward Chu from Toothless Coffee, who is a certified Specialty Coffee Association barista and recognized as a World Coffee Event judge. And Edward was just showing me his live coffee bid just now, which is I find that very, very interesting. Whilst he was here, he was also bidding for coffee lots.
Yes, I was bidding for coffee lots through the Singapore Specialty Coffee Association. Yeah.
Fantastic. And also, last but not least, we have Christopher Chua from Pagi Coffee Co., who runs a mobile coffee truck.
A coffee truck and a small shop in Subang, SS15. Yeah.
Okay, let's not waste any more time. So we'll just head straight to the questions. So to begin, and these are very simple questions. I think it's nothing that needs a lot of mental power. So, what makes a good cup of coffee? For this round, anyone can volunteer to answer first. Just very briefly, just want to know what do you think makes for a good cup of coffee? Any volunteers? I see Christopher rubbing his hands. I think he has something to say. Please do.
It's tough to give the definition of good coffee. I mean, recently we have a famous saying about coffee in the sense that there's no right or wrong what kind of coffee you like, but actually there's good and bad about what coffee you actually have. So I wouldn't say drinking kopi or is bad, but it's of a worse quality coffee compared to what you usually have in certain cafes and stuff like that. But there's no right or wrong on preference. So it's tough to give exact definition of good coffee, I would say. Yeah. Because it comes down to personal preference in the end. Yeah.
I mean, before I jump on, before I get someone else to answer that, because you run a mobile coffee truck. So I mean, what do you find that, what do your customers look for? Because I mean, if it's mobile, then people probably want it fast. And would they wait for coffee art, or are they just looking for that caffeine fix and I want it now?
Actually, both, I would say. I mean, I run a coffee truck. That truck, the tagline was called "Leave Your Caffeine Needs to Us." So it was mainly focused on caffeine needs. So we are not using really fancy coffee like geishas or some 1 kg 1000 USD coffee or something like that. So we are just focusing on really simple some Sumatran mandolin with Java mix, which most people would like chocolatey, caramelly, nutty, the usual stuff. Yeah, so I would say both, because most people still want a fix when they come to us, but at the same time, quality is kind of subjective towards consumer to consumer. So yeah. Did I answer the question? Sorry.
I suppose. Yeah. I mean, it's an open-ended question. I'd like to hear more from you. So what about you, Edward? What do you think? I mean, especially as a roaster, you deal with, coffee from, Brazil, from South America, from South Africa, all over the world. So what would make a good cup of coffee?
Okay, first and foremost, I think that coffee is actually a very, very personal preference. Okay, it really depends on your cultural background and also on your exposures on coffee and also on the things that you actually eat. So for example, if you always eat fruits that are very acidic, so you are more accepted to coffee which is more acidic. Whereas if you are more towards a person who likes to eat dark chocolate, then you will prefer those kind of notes. So, but it really depends on the origin and the terroir of the coffee as well. So different origins will have different characters of the coffee. And depending on the varietal and the climate where it is grown, then it will impact on the taste of the coffee. So as a roaster, when we come across any origins, we will actually do a cupping and actually get to know more about the coffee before we actually roast and profile the coffee. So once we actually know what kind of character the coffee, whether it has malic acidity or citric acidity, what kind of sweetness, how is the body like, then only we will set a profile for the coffee. Roast it according to highlight the preference and the main character of the coffee itself. So for example, if the coffee is actually Kenya, we will actually try to get more of that cane sweetness and that very delicate body as well to highlight more of the coffee. But also depends on some customer might not like those kind of acidity. So it really, really depends. So when it comes to roasting, we will roast light roast up to dark roast, depending on our customer preference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you would customize it according to what they want?
Yes, yes.
Would this include both individuals and, because you supply to cafes as well, so,
Yeah, yeah.
so either whatever they would ask from you?
So normally we will actually depend on what they actually want. So we will actually roast according to what they want.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, I saw you nodding quite a bit to that answer. So, I mean, I'm curious to know how you see that question. I mean, especially it's coming from a roaster's perspective, and because you deal with it. I mean, I'm pretty sure you deal with a lot of roasters. Because I mean, you, correct me if I'm wrong, but you try to present and serve ASEAN coffee. So,
Correct.
how is? I mean, I'm putting you on the spot, but is there a good ASEAN brand of coffee?
I think that's a very good question, right? We'll come to ASEAN blend later. But first of all, let me kind of like, introduce myself a little bit and see how I can add value to the topic. And first of all, I'm not a coffee connoisseur. I do not know a lot of things compared to, Christopher. He owns a coffee shop, I don't. Edward, he's a great barista. Judge, I'm not. And Eddie owns a coffee farm, which I'm not also. But I think how I can add value is from a commercial standpoint. I'm a coffee drinker. I need to drink coffee every day, else I cannot stride through the day. So sort of like from commercial standpoint, right? The good varies. Like, I don't know how we define good. I think from commercial standpoints is how we fill in the gap of what a customer needs of the time of the day, right? So for morning, you need a coffee that gives you the kick. So it has to be convenient, affordable, quick, and have the kick. So meaning the caffeine. For lunch, you need to chill a bit. So the ambience is important, the taste is important, and the furnitures fit out, everything is important. But for me, a good cup of coffee has to come with a sustainability story. Because I feel like, we need to give the farmers, the barista, and even the shop owners a fairer stage to present their products, which they have been working very, very hard on for the past many years. I feel like, a good brand is a brand that tells good stories. So what I feel is lacking in terms of defining a good coffee is the story behind the coffee. I feel like a lot of brands, a lot of beans haven't really told a story to the world of their great products. And from commercial standpoints, from business standpoint, that's our job to tell the customers what is so good about Janda by coffee beans, what is so good about Edward roasting techniques, and so on and so forth. Hence, yeah, I do not know like about citric taste, cane taste, I can't tell, but yeah, when you need that coffee, you have it at the time, at the expectations that you expect, for a lot of people, it's a good coffee. It's as simple as that.
All right. I mean, I think that's
Yeah.
also a very interesting answer, because we're looking at it beyond just that single cup. You know, it's also the experience and also the supply chain, you know, which I think brings us nicely to Eddie, because I mean, you run a cafe in Janabait, but also you grow your own beans. So I think asking you what makes for a good cup of coffee, I have some suspicion what your answer might be, because it's like you grow your own beans. But do continue.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me here. Basically, like my interest in coffee started because of my background. Also, who was born in Sumatra, and then I went to the States and I became U.S. citizen. So I learned a lot about coffee culture over there. And then after college, and you know, it was like in a financial crisis. I'm looking at doing something that I knew better. So and that also can be, I see this coffee like three different things. First as commodity, and as culture, and also as a medium, a tool that you can bring for, you know, bad or good. So here I was at the very end of the supply chain, or coffee shed, if you would say. Then I look, so you know, what can make and how we make it sustainable, and how we can use this tool to resolve a lot of other problems. For instance, conservancy. You know, like if in my native land, for instance, where they are now like rushing for palm oil, right? So how to protect that rainforest? You have to introduce something to farmers, and then what can make they appreciate of their commodity, and how they feel of it. You know? So if you back to the taste, the preference, yes, that's I think more or less it's been described by you know, other panelists. And what I see here is almost the same. Like if you haven't had a good coffee, and you ask a farmer, is it good coffee? And they don't know, like, what is the taste of tangerine, you know, or what is the taste of these nuts that is strange for them. So then we have to educate them. And how to democratize this coffee. So it's not only exclusive, and now you pay a lot, but you pay, so a lot of profit actually made by this, you know, like high-end, like roasteries and cafes, but and then also the processor. So but in the very lower level, those farmers, they will get the same. You know, let alone this, I've been following about certification and everything. So I think all that is not really addressing, you know, the significance of that particular case. So that's basically it for me, and I would like to take a bit of time for you guys to say hello to Banjaran Origin. So this
special guests.
Yeah, our coffee.
You know whether can we get that on camera?
Yeah, to get one.
I see.
So this is, tell us a little bit about this bean.
Yeah, I just picked up this morning.
Oh, you just picked it up this morning. Oh, okay, like so. How long does it take for it to get to this point?
That's actually Edgar had mentioned that earlier. It depends also on the rain, you know, the suns and everything around it. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Just return this to you before I eat it.
So you can keep it.
Yeah. So yeah, I think from just the initial responses, we can see that the idea of a good coffee is not just one single thing. You know, there's the customer taste, there's the sustainability angle. There's, you know, we also have to think about how the trade helps farmers, but also makes sense for cafe owners and roasters, so that it makes for good business. Which brings us to a segue into our next question. So when it comes to, because there's many tiers to coffee consumption, as you guys have mentioned. You know, there's the high-end craft coffee, and then there's instant coffee. So there's a lot of taste to cater for. And like in a country like, for example, Malaysia, and I'm pretty sure this is possibly true for a lot of other countries as well. For the most recent statistics that we have, based on household expenditure, per household spend on coffee is about 8 ringgit a month. So, I mean, I was quite surprised myself. I mean, I basically burned through that in half a day. So, I mean, I'm a bit embarrassed about that when I read that stat. So, yeah, I mean, and so my question would be, how do you make this, I mean, how do you make good business out of this, like out of coffee? And I know this is a loaded question and there's a lot to unpack here, but we'll try to do this in 5 minutes each. So, Eddie, why don't you take the floor?
Sorry. How about to make it better, do you think?
I mean,
do you mean
how do you sort of like meet the different, how do you meet the demands of the market?
Okay, that's also very hard because I believe that you have to create that demand too. You know, like in Malaysia, usually, you know, when we talk about coffee, like 10 years ago, maybe more, they don't really think about this, or you know, like even if you go to like chains that is like pop chains, for instance, like Starbucks or whatever, the product they introduce in Malaysia is not the same as the product they introduce in other countries. So the same thing if you get a car, you know, you get the same car, but you won't get the same features of the car that you have here in Malaysia and in Europe. It's I mean, depends on how this process of getting it. And then back to about this coffee trading, I think as today is a coffee day, all the coffee lovers in Malaysia should celebrate that. And also thanks to the previous government who's like abolished the AP, which is totally something that is not, I mean, you know, like limit this coffee culture or coffee lovers to get the good beans. Because during the AP, if you need to import coffee, good coffee, you have to have the AP from somebody else who doesn't even know about coffee. You know, so you have to pay them for nothing. So this already improve, you know, the trades in that sense. But these are the, you know, as coffee is the second largest after oil, and of course it attracted many big players. So when I was in the States, I saw, hey, suddenly Tata has a brand of coffee. You know what I mean? But yeah, they could do it, but they still Tata, who's known for iron makers or steel makers. So yeah, that's it from me, I guess.
So just specifically, like what about you as someone who grows your own brand of coffee? Like, is there like a particular range of the market that you aim for?
Well, yeah, I would say that when we went into Janabai, so we developed something. At the time, Janabai was a quiet place, but we liked the environment. We saw a lot of, yes, the beehive effects. So that's what the late Steve Jobs said. It's not there, right? So who's gonna pick those coffees? And you know, who not many Malaysians who's willing to do this, like facing mosquitoes, you know, arnots and all those kind of things, or ants, you know, like. So this also, but you know, becomes our main concern. But what we particularly concerned about that when we try to introduce this business, we are not trying to compete with the locals. So with all their abilities with other guys, you know, so that's why we set our price as a, you know, to define our boundary. I think that's what our main concern. And then what we produce actually. Well, I'm not that expert in many things, but I have learned this process from the tradings and the cultivations, also the processing up to you know, serving coffee. I think every steps, you know, that if you put something like patience or efforts, for sure you will get you know, different kind of qualities. You know. I like the idea of Tabasco, for instance, why it could stand for many years, because that family, like, you know, that the boss himself, I think the son of the founder, and every morning would go to the farm, the chili farm, just to identify, you know, what good, what, you know, and ripe enough to harvest. So that's basically it. Yeah.
A lot to unpack as well. So to pack in a bit more into the question, how do you meet the demands of the market? I was told that amongst Grab drivers who are probably big consumers of coffee, and they seem to consume a lot of local coffee. In particular, I mean, there's mentions about kopi Muar, Semua origin coffee. So I mean, so as someone who deals with the mass market, you know, it's like how is this also another case of market segmentation, or do you really have to pick and choose where you basically focus your energies on?
Exactly the point, right? Because from business is 80-20 rules. I don't believe there's a business that, you know, cater the mass market, even Milo, right? They choose who to target. It's either the kids or the parents. Same goes to Santan or AirAsia. From in-flight perspective, which is on board, we tried the coffee machines to put it in the back of the kitchen galley. Commercially, marketing perspective, they thought it makes sense. Spend quite a lot of money doing that, then realize that it doesn't make sense.
Sorry, I mean, just sorry to cut in, but like, was there an actual like espresso machine?
Coffee machines,
Okay.
yes, like the brewing machines, which a lot of full service airlines do, right? Then end of the day, you realize that it doesn't make sense for operations, because imagine the crew running back and forth the aisle, just try to make a cup of cappuccino for a Singapore flight. That's like 40 minutes. So by the time you run down and make the cup of coffee, okay, it's landing. You don't even get a chance to drink the cup of coffee. Hence, that's why AirAsia is serving instant coffee. It's serving coffee in sachet format, in drip bag format. So I believe that, you know, your market is there. You need to curate a product that fits the market. That makes sense for a business. Okay, so for retail, which we have, we used to have Tea & Co., which we are sunsetting it and then consolidate into Santan, right? So basically we take what is the best for Tea & Co. and then put it into Santan, because of course we believe that if we have $1 in marketing, we would spend all the $1 in promoting one brand instead of two brands, so that it's focused, it goes to markets more impactful. So retail sites, yes, we because Santan is a fast food, it doesn't make sense to have coffee machines as well. We are not like Mac Cafe. So, but it doesn't hinder us from serving good coffee. So we changed the ASEAN blend, our own ASEAN blend coffee into like drip bag format. So we try our best to not lower down the quality while serving it fast. So we believe that, you know, instead of like powder formats of like just black coffee, putting it in drip bag, it gives a better experience in terms of drinking. It gives a better taste, and also hopefully it serves the purpose of being fast. And we couldn't make like matcha latte in machines, so we put matcha latte into like a powder format. The taste is not too bad. Price is affordable. Hence, like what you say is right. We have to curate products to fit our target market. Hence, different formats, and I believe it works. We have great white coffee from Malaysia. We have great Sabarika bean, janda beans from Malaysia, which it can be made into different formats, I believe. Yeah.
Okay, cool. But I mean, do you find that, is there an optimum price point that you found works for, you know, the 80% of the market?
Yeah, so it's within the 5 to 8 ringgit range. So don't mention about RTE, right? Like ready to drink coffee in cans. Thailand is a huge market. There's only like 2 ringgit maybe a can of coffee that fits the driver's market, because like I say, a good coffee to drivers is a coffee that gives me the kick, affordable, go. For them, that's a good coffee. Yeah, so it's within that 2 ringgit range for the RTE. Yeah.
Interesting. So, I mean, even within the mass market, there's also these different tiers.
Definitely.
So, I suppose the same question could be asked to Edward, because you deal with the higher end of the scale.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you told me before about I think Christopher mentioned in passing, the geishas.
Mm-hmm.
You know, these are super expensive beans, you know. I mean, I don't know whether they're coated in gold, but they might as well be. So it's like, how, at that end of the scale, again, the same question, how do you choose where do you want to focus your energies on?
Okay, first of all, we actually focus more towards specialty coffee. Okay, every coffee that will be graded, and each grade will then be priced accordingly. So depending on the grade of the coffee, it will subject to the higher the grade, the higher the cost of the coffee. Okay, of course, we always try to go direct together with farmers in order to optimize the money value that we actually get and also pay the farmers the right amount. Okay, so if you were to see the coffee at a scoring around maybe 86 or 87 and the coffee is $4, 4 USD, we would think that maybe we can actually give more to the farmers because it's definitely more than 4 USD. It's probably going to be like 7 or 8 USD. So as a roaster, then we are willing to pay more to the farmers in order to encourage them. Just now we were talking about sustainability. So if we were to sustain our consumer markets but not sustain the productivity of farmers, then there will not be any more coffee. So we have to look back to the other way of the chain. So if coffee quality is going up and coffee demand is going up, but coffee supply is going down due to climate change, then automatically the coffee prices should go up. Okay? But it is very difficult for us to price in Malaysia because there is a ceiling price. Even though at the high end, there is a ceiling price that customers are willing to pay. So then we always have to look whether different coffee suits different market. So for example, you said geishas. So the targeted consumers for geishas in Malaysia is actually not a lot. Not many people actually know what geishas are. Okay? But we do buy geishas. We buy geishas because of the taste, the quality of the coffee, and we also pay into the effort of the farmers. Year in, year out, they actually try to produce a better scoring coffee. Just this year, the Panama coffee, Finca La Sofia, actually got 1,300 USD per pound. So that is actually the current highest scoring coffee in the world right now. So for that, of course, people would be like saying, would I pay so much for a cup of coffee? But it's not just a cup of coffee. It's a livelihood of somebody, a farmer, the hard work of the farmer, the investment they have actually put into the farm, the technology, the time that they have put years into that. And then towards the roaster, where they actually roast the coffee, they have to try to roast the coffee. Then they have to have weight loss when doing the roasting process. There is a lot of losses that you actually can't see as a consumer. Those are then actually put back into the selling price.
That's right.
So I think then you really have to look at the price does not necessarily reflect the years and years of effort. And even as a roaster, you have to develop your palate and your ability to know the different types.
Yeah.
But just to bring reality even in more stark opposition to us, with COVID-19 going on, there's a lot of uncertainty in the air. That's putting it mildly, but also its impact on growers and also on consumption. There's this expectation that consumption is going to fall by a bit. People are not going out as much. But specifically to you, how would the impact of COVID-19 and how it impacts how beans are grown and picked, what would be the sort of like the supply chain impact and what would it mean for prices?
Okay, so we actually spoke to a couple of farmers. We asked them directly what is the direct impact of COVID-19 towards their livelihood and how are they harvesting the coffee. So there is a lot of feedback saying that they don't actually have manpower to harvest the coffee. As you know, now it's end of the year, so it's a lot of origin harvesting season. So they are unable to harvest the coffee, so meaning that coffee are actually allowed there to rot. And the hard work of the year is actually not being harvested. So there will be a surge of price in the specialty coffee market segment because all of these loss are not being produced back into green coffees. So we do see that there will be a surge in price, but we as a roaster, we do not know how to actually bring up the price to consumers because it's very, very difficult. But there is actually a spike in coffee consumption during the COVID-19 in Malaysia. We actually see a lot more retail coffees. In terms of roastery, the consumption of coffee actually went down because we don't roast as much for wholesales, but there is a spike in direct to consumers because people started to buy more coffee to actually brew at home. Yeah.
So it's not all doom and gloom, even despite whatever's going on and people not going out. So there's still that, you know, all these different ways of delivering coffee to the house, you know.
Yeah.
What about you, Christopher? Because
what was the question again?
So the question is, how do you meet the different demands and tastes of the market?
Oh,
but
okay.
I mean, just because we've touched a little bit on COVID-19, and because you run two retail,
Yes.
I mean, yeah. So you've got the Atas, which is a cafe, and Atap. Sorry,
Atas.
Atap. Atas coffee.
Yeah.
So Atap, which is a cafe, and the truck.
Okay.
So, and I mean, with the lockdowns, I mean, globally, we've seen people basically told to not go out as much, to stay home. So it's like you're already trying to meet different segments of the market, but now with this going on, I mean, I suppose it becomes even more challenging for someone who's in the coffee business.
Yes. So actually, for the coffee truck, since last year, we actually already see like there are a lot of external factors that control retail coffee business from a truck perspective. So we were actually last time parked at Taman Tun, actually, the other side of Taman Tun. But since last year, we already had plans to started a brick and mortar on our own in SS15. So happened to be when COVID strikes and then the lockdown, we couldn't run the daily operation of the truck at all. So we take 2 months break from March to May, 5th of May, if I'm not mistaken. Then we started back the coffee shop. But the coffee shop wasn't our main focus since then. So it was never our main focus because the main breadwinner that time was still the truck. So we have to came up with something to help to sustain the shop because the shop only started like last year November, end of November. So not many people known about us and stuff like that. So how we cater to it is like we do much more. I finally spend for social media marketing because I'm never a person to like try to do like social media marketing like that. So I will always believe in word of mouth, organic marketing and stuff like that. But COVID like forced me to like go into that route. So like I started to do that, and then we offer delivery service and stuff like that with the coffee and stuff like that. And also we kind of rebrand the shop as a team shop because we realized that we don't share the same customer pool back from the truck. It was a two very different direction in terms of the consumption, the style of what they like, and the target audience, stuff like that. So we rebrand, and then we start to collaborate with my friends, the one that sell sandwiches as well, back from the food truck days, because so we kind of help each other out. So he was from the food truck, he stopped his daily operation. Then that's how Atap was born during June. And so far, we've seen like there's increased consumption after the COVID. I feel everyone kind of start to be very loose and stuff like that, and then everyone tend to get more relaxed with things, but we try to do our best from our end to make sure the SOP is met and stuff like that. Yeah, but overall consumption is increasing for us, but I'm not sure about the rest of the market because I only have one data for myself. Yeah. But I do realize something that I want to go back to the question. Coffee professional, that I think the main problem right now, like I mentioned coffee professional because we have a very detached flavor preference compared to the mass market, I would say. We have a huge gap in between that no one trying to fill up, like as a coffee professional. I mean like the front end, the most front end, which is the barista and all. But the thing is, we always forgot that we actually have the transition phase. So in order to appreciate coffee, like especially coffee, it has a learning curve, which is kind of, I wouldn't say weird, like wine and all, and because we are trying to move towards like a more fine craft industry. I'm not sure whether it will help the farmer that much or not in a sense, but it definitely has become quite a community lah in Malaysia. You will be surprising. But going on with the sustainability thing that I wanted to add on is that I feel like right now it has formed like a small social circles about like coffee, but we are getting further and further from the market, like from the mass market in general. So I am not sure whether this would turn into a positive outcome or a negative outcome, but I can see the scene is slowly growing up from that side. Yeah, that's all I want to say. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just before we go on to the final section of our panel, I just want to throw this out to anyone. So, especially with COVID-19 and the lockdowns, how much has the internet helped with basically your business, whether in terms of marketing it or as a new retail channel, or as a way, with food delivery becoming more common? I mean, anyone want to share?
Well, if I want to say a bit on this, we are totally different. I feel a bit pity to those who operate the businesses in malls, so to say, or in closed space, because it seems, after lockdown, more and more people returning to nature, and they like to spend time in a green space or open space, and that's we got influx of customers right now. And in fact, we wanted to promote not to come too many to our place, because we are also worried about these diseases, this virus. So we are more concerned about that rather than only making money or whatever. Yeah.
So there's also the health components. I mean, because you're also selling an experience, so not just the beans.
Yes. The ambience, the experience, and I think coffee is a lot has to do with experience. You can't really promote your coffee just by having a nice advertising. That's why Starbucks never promote their beans. So they promote through their chains, their stores. That's all.
So you're paying for the experience. So that's what I'll tell my mother when I pay for coffee next time. So anyone else want to add on to that?
I think that definitely social media has helped the coffee industry. What it promotes is actually a micro tourism within Malaysia itself, where everyone can actually travel. So people started to travel within their area or within the same states, or maybe going to a different state to actually explore. So that's why a lot of our cafe business actually getting better at this particular phase. And I would say that a lot more people hopping into social media, trying to tag along, trying to increase their businesses as well. So it definitely does help. Yeah.
Right, thanks. So, final round. How can we make coffee better? Again, it's all very big questions. What is good? What is better? But what we know is we don't want it bad. So, just based on your individual areas of expertise, how do you think the industry, the experience, the drink itself can be improved, especially with what's going on now and how people are experiencing their daily lives? You're a bit afraid to go out, but you still want that good cup of coffee in the morning. Yeah.
Well, to make a better, to improve this trade, I think it should start with, if you want to start in the farmer perspective, or from the ground, we should educate them. It's not only to give a price, a good price for their products or commodity, but also how to teach them doing things responsibly, passionately, and hygienic, and also maintain their business, and make use of their resource as good as possible. Often, when in this level, let's say you help farmers to give them a good price for their coffee, but if they don't know how to manage their money, and they would be also at loss. For instance, it would come, somebody's offering new machine, for instance, okay, I will give you this machine, but that's a crop would be mine for the next for the harvest. So often farmers trap in this situation because of they are not capable of managing their resources. So I would like to see improvement in that area, and also how this free trade and rainforest alliance and all those kind of thing works. Is it very exclusive that is issued in Germany or whatever, they operate from there, and do they really know about how this day-to-day practice in that community? And then also there are other players, and not coffee players, but when the stock market is bad, people like going to commodity. So then they would create this bubble demands, and just almost like wipe out all this small players. So we should be careful also. I don't know how we can administrate that in the international level, or I would say it's better in regional or local level, because there where for sure what is the player, what is the negativity, how they trade their coffee and everything. But when you price thing, when you appreciate something just based on price, and often trap, also you give this advantage for them to misuse that. And for instance, like people pay a lot of money for I would say not natural loa, for instance. Like you abuse that animals, and you don't really see the benefits of it, except that animal prefer the cherry, the red red cherry. So and actually human can do that, you don't have to force animal to do that. So but if you give meat to that, of course the price would go up. You can justify that, you find a way how to justify that. But at the end of the day, the farmers also would use this, maybe like who's not responsible, to just mess up their coffee and present to you as lower, because that's pricey. You can mix it with something else and make it as natural as possible, and then you would pay for it. And you say to customers, oh, this is really lower, and they would pay for that cup of coffee. But is it is your honesty comes with it? So that's why from the first start I would not involve myself in this type of business, because I cannot justify it. I don't know how many loa would they produce naturally. And I think that's
almost like the contrast to what you initially mentioned about the story behind the coffee, because it's sometimes in the pursuit of that story, like in your case you mentioned luwak, all this different factors of exploitation, and animal abuse comes into it. So I suppose, in a way, maybe you'd like to respond to that, but also coming back to the question of like, how do you make it better?
I think to make coffee better, first of all, we need to start by making the livelihood of the people who make the coffee better, right? I'm not sure if it's too complicated, but basically making the farmer's life better. So through what? Through maybe fair trade, so that the farmers get the most margin of their harvest, not the middleman or not whoever in the chain, right? And hopefully they can use their resources better by not falling into the trap of like technology or machines or whatever.
Can I add a bit with that? Especially the middlemen now in the area where they produce a lot of coffee. I think the farmers don't really process their coffee, so the middleman would buy just like cherry from them. So then they process. So actually, middlemen already there. So unless you give states or whatever government give more incentive to these folks, how they can take that over, or reduce the influence of the middleman. Okay, sorry about that.
Yes, correct. I believe that's what MOA is trying to do now with AirAsia Our Farm, right? Deal directly with the farmers. So the farmers is the ultimate benefits of the whole chain. of course, not by killing the business and not exploiting, the price from the end users. In terms of story, I don't think we need to go to that extreme of like promoting luwak and whatever. From my perspective is that there are so many good beans in ASEAN, many good beans from Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, and even in Malaysia. It's just that there are no stories to back up the good produce from all these farmers. Businesses always go to like South America to get beans and so on and so forth, right? Because I don't know, maybe the beans from like South America is somehow better. It's like 100% Arabica, so on and so forth. Consumers just see 100% Arabica, good beans. That's how business brainwash the consumers. I believe from ASEAN, right, we need to advocate and support the whole ASEAN initiatives by business really take products from ASEAN countries and promote it and take it of our own. If we start promoting the ASEAN beans and hopefully reduce the usage of beans from other countries, the volume will grow. Once the volume grows, the supply will grow. So throughout the chains, the whole chain would benefit. That's the story I'm trying to promote and advocate. That's why, in AirAsia, we create our own ASEAN blend. Not just to store it, but really we want to push for the whole ASEAN agenda as like EU, right? Because as we unite together as a whole continent, we would stand a better chance for the world. So besides, sustainability is from the some farmers, and I think story, customers need to feel relatable. I think right now is good opportunities to promote local produced, right? People will be more open to try out instead of go for like higher end South America beans and stuff like that. Besides that, I think one more very important element which I hope I can help to push is that packaging, because to make a good cup of coffee, we consume a lot of packaging. And then when we talked about sustainability, it's very costly because when you want to do a green packaging, it's costly. To a business standpoint, business also needs to survive. If only we are the only business that take the environmental friendly packaging, we cannot sustain, we cannot pay that cost. But however, if we all do it together, when there is a volume, the cost will go down. So throughout the chain, we all can win. When everybody is advocate about, go green, get the environmental friendly packaging, I think we need to find a balance. And I hope all businesses can, stay united in this and do this together with the government.
So when there's volume, then everyone can win.
Yes, because if you want the environmental friendly packaging supply to just produce for your business, it's very costly and business won't take. But if there's a huge volume in the markets, just like in Europe, then the cost is cheaper. Then we all can take it. Honestly, we need to protect the environment until it's too late, right? And everybody says that during the lockdown, after the lockdown, the beach is cleaner and whatsoever. I'm not sure. Is it? And now he doesn't want human to go to his farm. He wants to protect his coffee beans. I'm going to Janda Bai in Saturday, by the way. So, I'm one of those that, I need the nature and stuff. But I think all of us should be responsible. And I think we need to take the initiatives to really think how we can protect the environment better moving forward. And also to help the farmers, and also, business can win in this whole consuming process together.
Okay, cool. No environment, no coffee. I think that's pretty much simple.
Yeah.
So for Edward, so basically, again, we're talking about better coffee, and we've heard about stories. We've heard about keep making it more sustainable. But at the end of the day, customers want to smell their coffee, want to taste their coffee. So how do you kind of meld that together so that it makes better coffee,
Okay, like what Catherine said just now, a lot of consumers, they go for coffee that they actually are familiar. So coffee that are from specific countries, specific origins, specific regions. So like, for example, Ethiopian. We have a lot of customers coming to us and say, do you have any new type of Ethiopians are you bringing in today? But for us, we actually think that, like you said about Asian coffees, we actually prefer Asian coffees there's a lot of very, very good coffees around Asia, Myanmar, Thailand, Indonesia. Just last year, we paid for 500 ringgit per kilo for a Thai coffee. And that coffee was a lot better than some of the geishas that we actually drank before. And that coffee was actually brought into the Malaysian Brewers Championship. Yeah, so it was a very, very great achievement. But of course, consumers needs to be more open-minded to origins, not just see that, oh, this coffee is from a specific region, specific processing, but be more open-minded to different coffees, okay? So because people are very dependent on the taste of the coffee, but for us as a roaster, when we taste coffee, we taste it blindly. We don't actually put into the origin into as a factor or even the price. We will judge it accordingly as how it tastes like. And then only we will review the origin. Then from there, we will only base on whether if that coffee is worth the price, worth serving to customers or not. So yeah, to answer that, then of course we have to educate our consumers to be more open, to try different origins, to not judge by the book by its cover, to actually try out the coffee first. Yeah.
So you just give them a chance. It doesn't matter if it's from a place that you've never heard of, or maybe it's, like, it's not known for its coffee. It might be as good or better than something that you're more familiar with.
Yeah, correct.
Okay, cool. I mean, that's really interesting as well. What about you, Christopher? I mean, Mike, probably what I'd like to know from you is because I like going to cafes. Because it's like home away from home is where you can go to work or just to chill out. So how much of that is a part of the coffee experience?
How much? You mean the conversation, the working experience?
Maybe something you just want to stay there by yourself, just tune out and just have a cup of coffee.
If you happen to see my shop before, it's a very small shop. It's very intimate. I guess if you are there, you won't be able to work, most likely. You only talk to me or you just stay quiet. I think that's about it. Yeah, about how to make coffee better. A lot of the time, actually, I feel personality does affect a lot, like who is manning the bar, who is manning the what. So it does give a very different experience. For example, if I were to serve a bad cup of coffee to you that you don't like to drink, maybe it's too sour, too acidic, but because I'm friendly enough, you might be okay with it. Yeah, something like that. So I think that makes up to like, what is that called? The experiences in
Human touch.
Yeah, the human touch with it. But about better coffee in ASEAN, I want to add on something. Only recently I served Sabarika in my coffee shop. So to be honest, Sabarika is not cheap. Although it's local produce, it's not very cheap for yeah. So about that, when I try to push it to customers for like what he said, especially those that are very aware of what's going on in specialty coffee scene, they would consider like Sabarika as something that is slightly inferior to, because it's not towards their liking, for example. But I am bringing it in because I saw improvement, like each year by years is improving, like Sabarikas and stuff like that. If we don't even want to give a chance to the producer at the first place, it would be tough. But to be honest, I lost money from buying it because I can't really serve it all. I have to just let people try it and stuff like that. Yeah, so I guess cafe owners, especially coffee shop cafe owners, in order to support some things, you have to be able to willing to take up the opportunity to introduce things that not so familiar towards your specialty coffee consumers and stuff like that. Yeah, but yeah, that's all.
It's a risk you have to take.
It has to be a risk, or you have to be a very good salesman. You try to convince something that maybe is there, maybe it's not there, and then you make them believe that it's there or something like that. Because a lot of the time it's kind of, I wouldn't say weird, but for example, if I say strawberry in your cup of coffee, most people will be like, what?
Yeah.
Strawberry in my cup of coffee? They will be so mind blown. Like, how do I have strawberry in my cup of coffee? So they thought like I put strawberry inside my coffee or something like that. But when we mention like strawberry in a cup of coffee, we are talking about the flavor notes that reminds us of berries in the coffee. It can come from the acidity of it. It can come from the aroma of it. Yeah, so that's how we usually describe. So, but the problem with especially coffee, I would still say it's a very niche marketing segment of it. There's a huge gap in between the general consumers and especially coffee consumers. But we hope we can try to close the gap nearer and nearer, year by year. It's a very slow process, slow and painful process. Because if I'm not mistaken, most Malaysian, we grew up with kopi peng and stuff like that. We generally hate acidic coffee.
Yes.
Yes, we generally hate acidic coffee. So that's why Indonesia coffee can sell very well in the whole world because a lot of people don't like. And then Indonesian coffee are generally like famous for slightly lower acidity and it give a very usual coffee taste to people and stuff like that.
So it's more agreeable to most palates, I suppose.
Maybe I want to add on like how to make better coffees. The barista, the most frontliner, they themselves has to be very well equipped with knowledges and skill themselves. I think that's the basic of it, and have the self-initiative and a passion to learn the craft of it and to be able to work closer with the roasters, give honest feedbacks to the roasters and stuff like that. And that's all I think from a frontliner perspective here.
I mean, I think you've basically convinced me not to go into coffee because it sounds like there's so many things to think about. You have to be a good salesman. You have to know how to roast. You have to know where it comes from.
You don't need to know how to roast. Roaster is but you need to know the process of roasting.
I don't think I can think of that much information. I'm just going to do a quick time check. Have we got time for questions? One or two, yes. So from the floor, I think if you have any questions, you're free to ask. And if there's anyone who wants to send in their questions online, please do so. Our organizers will pass it on to us. Yes, sir. Sorry, let me just get you a microphone.
All right. Hi, guys. So that was quite enlightening. Just have one question. What might the next wave of coffee look like? Like, what's the fourth wave? Or is it already starting? So I want to know.
I wouldn't say a fourth wave, but there's starting to appear a lot more on technological factors into making coffee. There's a lot of robotics, especially in Australia, a lot of robotics where they actually make coffee, they pour latte art, and then it's served right in front of you. Yeah, so I would say that will be actually something that will get quite popular, but it will not actually appear in a lot of countries, as actually it's going to be very, very pricey, and it doesn't make sense, yeah.
You know what? Want to add on to that? Automation, is that going to be a thing?
Agree to Edward. In fact, there's somebody doing the robotic arms to make coffee in Malaysia soon, but the price is a bit crazy because coffee is necessity, right? For people who drink coffee like me, like I say, it has to come down to basic. It has to be affordable, convenient, and basic good. So robotic, what is the purpose of robotic? Is to make it fast, but it cannot achieve the price that you want. So in a way, it will become redundant. So again, it comes down to volume in doing business, right? Unless everybody takes robotic, then that would be cheaper. But that's a process to come, not now. However, digitizations definitely has kicked in. Like Tea & Co, when we built Santa and Tea & Co, we built it on an e-commerce platform. We built it on digital. So that's why on MCO, we pivoted in a day. The next day straight, we go out to market shouting on delivery. And then we start shouting on, all our ready to eat and ready to drink items. That's how we pivoted, and it's digital and technology that enable us to cater for the demand in a different way. Yeah.
Anyone else would like to add to that?
Well, if I may add, as people keep experimenting with the way of making coffees, and we know that Italian, espresso machine. That what year was invented. So I think it's gonna be like a new upgrade to that, and also how the maybe GMO type of modification in coffee. I don't know. That's gonna be like a lot of nerds there, and as you know, sorry to say that in Malaysia because you're not allowed, but you look at the cannabis industry in America, how far they move this. They do this genetical modified and whatever, and to produce like the best that they can. So I think we would go there, and also I believe that when always improvement comes when you get a new kind of additional to it. For instance, you won't have YouTube unless you have Flash. When Flash created, then you can have YouTube. So the same thing here. You will get more and more, development in the years to come.
Yes, consumer taste progresses and technology. So it kind of like adds on to each other.
Well, maybe next time I would censor your, your tongue to know for sure what you need, for instance. Right?
So customized coffee.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Could be.
Any other questions? So I think we just have a few more minutes to wrap up. So I think any final comments, thoughts before we close the session? Christopher, let's start with you.
Thanks for the invitation, I guess. Honored to be here. Learn a lot. Yeah, that's about it, I guess. Yeah.
Just want to add a little bit on the fourth wave. There is a lot of processing of coffee. There's a lot of technology where wine processing is actually being placed into coffee. So using this kind of technology will actually enhance the taste, the flavors of the coffee, but it will actually sometimes cover up certain negative tastes of coffees as well. So for example, if you were to use a anaerobic process that could enhance certain berries characters of coffee, but they don't actually use too much of different type of varietal. They use specific lower grade varietal in order to enhance the quality of it. But this will actually jack up the price of that varietal, so making it not so realistic in terms of the quality versus the price of the coffee. Yeah, I think that will be also something that will start to emerge a lot more in the specialty coffee. Yeah. And thanks for having me here.
What about you, Catherine?
Not trying to be naggy, but I don't know how many business owners out there, right? Especially big brands like, FMCG. Hopefully we can really help the ASEAN farmers, right? I said it many, many times in all my speeches. Thank you so much for giving a chance to the Sabarika farmers. Definitely you need to give them a chance to learn and to grow along the learning curve, else we will never get there, right? So try to use more ASEAN beans from ASEAN farmers and try to give them the most margin out of it. And of course, hopefully trying to teach them the business skills so that they can manage the resources and their margins better. And also try to give more credits to people who are behind the cup, farmers, barista, roasters, because there's a lot of hard work behind it, even though, for us, it's just a sip. But why people can't appreciate wine? Why can't we appreciate coffee? Okay.
Very deep question there. Final words.
Well, thanks for having me here too. Just wanna, based on my experience here, what I see is Malaysia is a very good, you are lucky to be here in a piece of land that is less natural disaster, unless you created one. And then you have this all year rainfall, nice climate. Whatever got concern in Brazil, we rarely saw here. And when I grew coffee, that was once that we got this what do we call the heat wave that was a few years ago, when about 3 months I think we didn't get proper rain, but beyond that, we haven't found any problems with that. So when I saw around and what this Malaysian soil could produce, actually, that's a lot. You don't have to import a lot of foods here, and or herbs or coffee or tea, whatever. But you just need to introduce this to these young generations. That is about if you want to do something, especially in entrepreneurship or business, you don't just try to copy another Zuckerberg or whatever, because there are plenty of industries for you, and that you know better, and you should dive in and do something, and be creative. So don't afraid and just take risk. Yeah.
Thanks for that. And on that very motivational note, I'd like to thank our viewers and also our panelists for their generosity and for all the insights that you shared. I'm sure that there's so much more that we want to ask them, that we want to know about coffee, how it's served, the different palates, tastes, and all that. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this session. And I'll pass it back to Professor Maznad.
Thank you. Thank you, Lutfi, and that was certainly very insightful and very informative. As Lutfi says, we didn't have much time, but I'm sure individually we can all engage further. So thank you, Lutfi. Thank you, Eddie, Edward, Christopher, and Catherine. And I think with this, we've got to say goodbye to everybody. But before we do that, I'd like to say that, thank some people. Now, I've had to work with an awesome team. The production team consists of Lutfi Arif. You saw Sufyan. You did not see Farah, but she's behind us solving all the problems, all those technical glitches. Alia, Zul, Vashita, and the IT team, Kudri, Najmi, and Zafri. So thank you so much. And thank you to Muka for providing all this support and this lovely food. And to all of you who are still signed in, my goodness, thank you for still being here with us. This session, the previous session has been recorded, so it will be available on Facebook and Facebook, yeah. So and then you can come to our website too. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody again, and go grab that cup of coffee. Thank you. Thank you so much.